Buongiorno Mondo, and welcome back to 15 with Voska, the podcast. I am really happy to be chatting today with Miriam Hurley. Buongiorno, Miriam.
Hello.
I would like to start our conversation today by talking a little bit about your path to Italy. It's sort of the way I usually start. I know you're originally from Oregon,
Right.
so tell me how the heck you came to Florence all the way from Oregon.
Well, I often joke that it's because I watched the movie Room with a View too many times. But the longer version is that I did a junior year abroad in high school in the Netherlands, where it's full immersion with the family. And then, so I already knew I wanted to go abroad for college. I went to Sarah Lawrence, which is in New York, and when I chose it, I saw they had a program in Florence, and because I'd watched Room with a View too many times, I was already planning on doing that. So I did, and I spent my junior year, 1994, here. And then I'm sure that this is versions of this you've heard a lot, because it's always people are like leaving and coming back and leaving and coming back. And so I felt like I hadn't had, I was on a year-long program, and it was a great experience. I wasn't fully immersed like I had been in the Netherlands, and so I kind of felt like I needed to come back. And so I came back in '98 and taught English, which I sucked at.
I think we all taught English at a certain point. I think I sucked at it too.
I know, because it was like the default job, but like poorly paid, poorly prepared. Even had a certificate, and didn't work. And I lived here for like 6 months, and then I went back, and then I became a translator actually before I moved back permanently. So in 2000, I was in New York, and I started translating, while working another job. And then I became certified by the American Translators Association 2001. And my dad's a tax accountant, so he's like, you can write off any trips to Italy on your taxes. And
Very
so
smart.
From New York, I was in New York at this time. I went back and forth for like 3 years. I'd spend like 3 months or 6 months here and then there and write it off on my taxes. And then that got too tiring. I had cats and whatever. And so I said, basta. And in 2004, so 20 years ago, I moved here permanently. And now I do spend summers in America since I've had a child for 14 years, my daughter, Esme. And so we kind of, to keep in contact with family and everything.
Of course.
As you know, that's the problem with living abroad, is the distance from people there.
Is very hard, and I think also for your work, which I'd like to get back to in a second, but I think for your work it is so important to sort of keep up with U.S. culture, also the way it changes so quickly. I mean, language is in constant evolution, and so that's sort of your job. I mean, it's not sort of your job, it's absolutely your job to also keep up with all those new words that come about every second, it seems, right?
Which, of course, with the internet and international media and everything, it's not that hard for English compared to another language that's less dominant in the world, or back in the past when people would be so immersed that they would kind of lose their native language.
Exactly,
Here.
and that was fairly typical.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you talked about doing back and forth for a long time, and that's totally relatable for me because it's something I did as well. And I think a lot of it was determined and is determined by the job market. But you have a job that you really could have done anywhere.
Right.
So, why did you decide to move definitively to Florence?
Because ultimately I just liked it better. No disrespect to America, that has many nice things, but even now, when I think I did go back in 2016, which I used to call the year of all bad things before 2020 took its
Before
place.
2020 became the definitive year of bad things for all of us.
But the cost of living and such in America would actually make it if I had to move back to America now, I would have to change my work situation, because what's a good living here is like
A pittance
in
there. I know.
Portland. The
Yeah.
cost of, when I was there, it's the cost of everything like here. I don't have a car. Yeah, but child just, it's easier. I like many of the things, that I like are similar to things that people like as tourists, that the weather's better than anywhere I've
Then in
lived.
Portland, for sure.
Right, Portland and New York.
Right.
The food, obviously. Now I have, quite a strong community. And I like it about Florence that it's, for a small city, it's very international. So my friends are, variety from different countries, between Italian and South American and, all sorts of places, which is unusual for a city this size.
Yeah.
Because normally, obviously because of the history of Florence, whereas after, while in New York, it was like too big
Yeah,
of a city.
too big.
And too expensive, that I like the sort of in-between, like I ride my bike or my scooter, and, I like that level of containment that the city has. And of course, anywhere you've lived a long time, as a country in general, or as Florence specific, as your slogan makes clear. So there's like the dream, the room with a view under the Tuscan sun. Stuff. And then the reality of, doing bureaucracy and getting a permesso di soggiorno and all that. That's,
So let's talk
torture.
about that for a second, because that's where actually I want to spotlight your services a little, because you and I, even though we've lived in Italy for more or less the same amount of years, we have a lot of people in common. Our daughters are around the same age. We had never met.
Yeah, and we lived not far
And we
apart.
lived, exactly, and we're, which is often the case, busy professionals, raising kids, the whole spiel. But we did meet because I needed an official sworn translation. So I want to talk about what you do, tell us more about the kind of services you offer, and then I want to get more into what you do as a community builder as well. But let's start with your translator.
With translation, because I've done a really long time now, since it started in 2000, and I have different specializations. What I did for you is actually technically called certified translation, not sworn, because that's into Italian. You have to do swearing, where you actually go to the frickin' courthouse and have to swear the translation. And I actually now do help people do that indirectly. So I expanded my services to not just be me translating, but to connect them to other people's services.
Perfect.
Or like the friend we have in common who's a legal translator. I don't do legal, but I can work with her and give people what they need, because I like you, I like connecting people. So my specializations sort of run the gamut from the certified translations, because I'm one of only 37 translators that are certified from Italian to English from the American Translators Association.
Brava!
And so some translations, like the one I did for you, require that. So
Yes,
we're a very small amount of people who are allowed to do that. Other ones, because in America, it's unlike in Italy, where there's an official rules that apply to the whole country. There is no official translation rule for all of America. So every university
institution,
can say whatever they want.
Right.
And so some of them, like the one your daughter applied to, says you have to be ATA. The other one will say it can be anybody, but it has to be a professional translator, and they have to sign a thing. And so it's this whole...
I had no idea. A whole universe opened up to me. Seriously.
It's very, very complicated, because in each country has its own rules. So I can do them for England, for instance, for certain things, sometimes for Northern European countries. So I have a line that I've been expanding lately for that, because I also involve other professionals, have an assistant. There's a lot of busy work involved in those sorts of translations. More traditionally, like my official other specializations are social sciences, because I studied anthropology in college and find that all interesting. So I do work with academics a lot who want to be published in English, have to be published in English.
Absolutely.
Rather. And then tourism, which is obviously an endless need. Like right now I'm doing a guidebook to Rome that's put out by the Astronomy Institute of Italy, so that it's all places in Rome connected to astronomy and, and astrology actually.
That's
both of them.
fun.
Yeah.
So, I mean, so you do all these kinds of translations,
Right.
right? From the most sort of
Practical,
straightforward, bureaucratic, legal, to academic stuff. And I imagine you've probably done a number of different kinds of translation over the years.
Used to do like a huge percentage was architecture and design because I had like 5 magazines that were bilingual, and then with the crash of 2008, which was also when I was pregnant. It was,
yay, perfect timing. Thank you.
Like publishing industry went badly, and architecture went badly, and now it's come back around. So I still do a fair amount of that, which is mainly like in design, rather than the technical parts. But I actually liked it because it ended up being good because it gets boring doing too much of the same thing.
So what is your favorite type of, I love, just FYI, I love to translate, okay?
Many people hate it. Like many of my friends who are American, everyone's always, if you're an English speaker, everyone always asks you to do translations for them, and they're like, oh, it's so hard.
I love it though. And I always looked at it as a challenge, and I always had a lot of fun, and because I'm a writer, I always felt like I, could really, convey what needed to be conveyed.
Right.
But what, do you have a favorite type of translating to do?
Well, actually, I relate to that even the word challenge, I was just posting about this, that even if you've done it for 24 years, like every translation, almost every sentence is a challenge, and that's what makes it fun. So it depends on the type of translation and the type of challenge that you're facing. I really do a huge number of websites of my colleagues, of other translators, and they're the best clients because they understand translation, so they know what you need, and then they appreciate your creative effort in it. I like doing, I enjoyed it totally off my normal thing. I did scripts for a show on Netflix, like not the subtitles, but the script, because it was a co-production with Netflix, and so that was totally different. I had to talk.
So much fun.
I had to have my consultant of my Roman friend, because if anyone doesn't know, Florentine slang and Roman slang have like nothing in common.
That's hard too, all those nuances. And I think, even getting back to what I had said earlier, which was, well, you could have done your job also in the U.S. Yes and no, because, the Italian language is just as dynamic, right? And also there are so many differences.
And more regionally.
Regionally. And even if you just go from like Florence, maybe not from Florence to Siena, but almost, but certainly from Florence to Rome or Florence to Milan. Let's not even talk about the deep
Florence
south.
to Livorno.
Right, exactly. Or the extreme north. And I think those are those cultural nuances that give you that, the fact that you have this insider knowledge. You've been living here for so many years, you're raising a child here, you're really woven into the society and the language, so you have that understanding of those linguistic nuances, which are not easy at all.
No, and the problem is that understanding them, can create challenges. As you were saying, with being a writer is what probably makes you like translating, because that's the main skill that people who sort of improvise, do translations, just for some extra cash and aren't writers, because it's of the equation. There's like 3 skills. It's like deeply understanding the source text, which is Italian for me, writing well in English, which is the hardest one, and then the sort of art of translation is between, where you can, like, I also, now I evaluate grade tests for the American Translators Association of people who want to be certified by it, and there's a text that is invented that has inherent translation challenges, and it's the people, only 20% of people pass it, and it's usually because they translate word for word and they don't understand the nuance, and that there's not a one answer. It's not, people think of, especially people who don't know 2 languages or don't understand translation, think of it as just like this transposing of word for word. And it's like, all I have to do is take any text that's complicated, because a lot of things I translate are convoluted and complicated ways of writing.
Oh, yeah.
You can translate it literally, and it means nothing.
It means nothing, and I think that's where it's sort of the art comes in. So you've broken it down. There's definitely a science to it. You need to have a deep knowledge of both languages, a deep knowledge of sort of what the source text is trying to communicate. But then there's that art. That's what I loved always, the creative part. And I'm sure you, like me, people would send me translations. And I, and say, Fosca, could you just take a look at this? I have a feeling it might not be exactly.
Yeah, that's 100% of the time it means it's to be thrown away.
I have things that were alarmingly bad,
Right.
but perhaps done by a native speaker.
Yeah, it can be either way. It can be native speaker, non-native. They make different mistakes. But
Or AI. And this is something I really want to talk about with you. Because, see, as being the person I am, I would never think of AI as being like a threat to you, right? Because I say, oh, Miriam's so talented. She has it down. She's a professional. She's like, been in the field for over 2 decades. She trains people. She teaches, one of very few people who can actually do this. Where does AI, though, fit into all this? Because a lot of people think like, oh, I'll just use Google Translate or I'll just use this. So what's your read on AI and how has it affected you and your business?
So obviously it's a huge discussion on society in general. And translation, it has been on different levels even longer because I started in 2000, which there was already machine translation, but it was when it was word for word, which was particularly bad. And then I made this huge leap forward, I can't remember when, with the neural machine translation. And so we've been having this discussion since I started, and the market has just increased for demand in translation. So it's like Doomsville that hasn't materialized for a long time. So I've always taken it with a grain of salt. This, obviously is a big revolution and has affected the translation market and people who work with agencies, which I essentially don't work for agencies because they, especially Italian agencies, pay really badly because they take from their share from the translators, basically. So if
they take a cut.
I would charge a direct client like 15 cents a word, for instance, which is my standard rate for many things. The agency wants to offer me 6, right? So we have these conversations.
It makes no sense.
But people who I know from having obviously a lot of colleagues, that people who work for agencies have really felt the decline because of AI, because the types of jobs that you can do sort of in an automatic style, even if you're doing it humanly. So what it is, it doesn't remove the work altogether. They're offered what's called post-editing machine translation, which I've heard is super boring, and where they are correcting basically the things that it gets wrong. Whereas for me, which people are surprised, and sometimes I'm surprised, it actually hasn't affected my business at all. That because of the types of things that I translate and the types of clients I have. So the only thing is that people have seen, not just in my business, but in general, that because of all the hype around AI, that people mistakenly think that it can do things that it can't, or without, or from just like a stupid thing that drove me crazy, that my bank changed they had a new app right on the phone. And I made it so it's automatically, so it would go into the language that your phone was in. My phone was in English, so I had no option, and it just gave me machine translated.
Were you able to figure out what you were doing? How bad were the translations?
It was very bad, but I knew because I knew the Italian.
You knew the Italian,
right? So I knew when it said "go out," it was because it was "esci."
No,
which was
instead of disconnect.
Right. So it's like things, and some of it was incomprehensible. And I actually wrote them because I'm like, it's so irritating for me every time to have it.
Good for you.
And they took it off. Now it's just in English. So, but also just potential clients have that where they'll send you, and this was true before, they'll be like, oh, can you give a little proof? They always call it proofreading.
Right.
So if you're like, not that I would say revision, because that's
proofreading.
Like proofreading as if there's just a couple of things to fix, as opposed to, like, if I'm going to give you my proofreading rate, you don't think I also have a machine that could machine translate it and make this garbage, which is unusable, basically.
Yeah.
And so the AI thing has increased the number of people thinking that they're going to somehow trick you, and they're like, oh, it's already translated, I just need you to correct it.
No, No.
And it could be like, I'm not, like, I don't want to be like, head in my sand, that it could be like it's coming later for me. Like it's a painful, complicated topic in the translator world, because some people have been so affected by it, depending, like a great colleague who specialized in medical translations, and she's been really affected by it. She doesn't want to talk about AI. She's like, I want to talk about it.
And I think it does depend on the type. I think technical, I did a lot of translating in my life.
Right.
I'll admit it. We all do. You do what you have to do for money. But I loved translating, as I mentioned. And I would do a lot of those sort of technical, scientific things. And I was very meticulous about them. I would look up, all those medical terms and stuff. So I can see how that could happen.
Yeah, that's already been true too. Technical things have already been.
So like instructions, like instructions in every language on, your self, whatever. I can't even think of a good example on a vacuum cleaner or something. Right. Okay, it's no big deal, right? But the kinds of translations that I always loved were the literary translations, or you were talking about sort of the design ones or the anthropological ones. And those art, and those really neat art, literature. I remember reading a book once, and I'll, no comment, and this is way before, well before AI, well before the internet, anything, but a book, well before Kindles. And, my ex-husband was reading the same book in Italian. I was reading it in English. And there was an error, a translation error, that changed the meaning of the actual, the scene. And often, Luca and I, my current partner, will watch things in original language, but he'll put on the subtitles in Italian, and I'll say, stop, pause, wait, no, this is not what they wanted to say. This is what they wanted to say. Mm-hmm. But, also, like, I don't know about you, but I doubt you use AI for English, right?
No, so I use AI, like all translators use it, and like actually love it, not for translating per se, but for research. It's really good.
I've never used it.
I really suggest it if you're doing any translation jobs. I have like integrated with my, what we call a CAT tool, which has been around forever, which are computer-assisted translation, which is based on your own translations. So it's totally different than machine translation.
Right?
No, it's not even your intellectual property. It's a software.
Right.
Software, so that if you translated something 20 years ago, in my case, you can access your previous translations. And
so it's your work. It's just a tool that is like an archive of your work.
Right, but you can use it to draw on different resources and research that you do online. And so I'll use it. I have it like integrated with my CAT tool, and it has like a feature where it can go explain. So I'll take from the Italian and I'll explain, and then it will give you a whole descriptive thing in English, which often gives me the language that I need to do it. Right. So it's super useful for all sorts of things that I'll do. Like I have an automatic phrase that goes, what is the Italian word? What does this word mean in this sentence in Italian and English? And then it gives you this big descriptive thing that's much better than real Italians, human Italians, when I've been working in those Italian, because I don't have an Italian partner. So most translators I know have an Italian partner, and they will say like,
right, exactly. What does this mean?
Right.
What does this mean? I asked my daughter.
They never know. They're like,
right.
Well.
I asked my daughter yesterday because I had received an email, right? And it was unclear. To me, the Italian was not clear. Mm-hmm. And for those who don't know, Italians tend to, as synthetic as we are in English, Italians are verbose. And so usually, you have
half the challenge of translating is making it into English.
And I had this email which there was a sentence that I just could not wrap my brain around. And I said to Jada, I said, tell me, please, what your understanding of this sentence is. Mm-hmm. That's how, it was, all that roundabout way of saying basically, be there by 5 p.m., okay? And so, it's just, and it's an art. And I think it's important that we highlight not only the sort of the meticulous nature of the work that you do, but also this incredible creative and human element that you add to every piece of work you do. Thank you once again for tuning in to this week's episode of 15 with Fosca and for continuing to do so. Grazie mille e alla prossima volta.